This weekend, Edgar Wright's latest film, Last Night in Soho, debuts in theaters. So let's talk about it. In Last Night in Soho, a small-town girl moves to the big city in what once seemed like a dream turns into a nightmare. Now, with that description, I was intentionally very vague because part of the appeal of this film is discovering what the movie is all about as you watch it. So I saw this movie last week at a press screening. It was kind of a cool little experience for me. The screening was actually across town at a theater that I used to see movies at all the time when I was growing up, which meant I have a lot of nostalgia for this theater, so that was pretty cool. But it also means that it's a very out-of-date theater, which made for not necessarily the best experience for watching a movie. Be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about Last Night in Soho, or what's your excitement level for it? With that said, let's get started with the good. And the first thing to talk about with this movie is that it is unlike anything that Edgar Wright has directed before. This is very much a horror thriller, London nostalgia piece. It's kind of a combination of a bunch of different types of stories while doing something entirely new, but it doesn't at all rely on Edgar Wright's previous bag of tricks. It's not really funny. It's not designed to be fun. It's a different experience, but all of his talent as a director is still entirely on display. Now, I don't think Edgar Wright was in danger of anyone accusing him of being a one-trick pony, but this is him showing he is just a good director. Whatever genre you drop him into, he's going to bring something new to the table, and it's going to be high quality, visually interesting, and something distinct that stands out. He's not just the comedy guy. He really can do whatever he puts his mind to. He will deliver a solid film. Along those same lines, the way that he visualizes the situation going on with the girl in this film as she starts experiencing the 60s, the way that he kind of puts her into that world while telling its own story, it's visually interesting, it's captivating images, all of it is just done really, really well. And at times it comes off like this wonderful fantasy, and then when it turns dark, it feels like the nightmare that it's supposed to be. Now, as this is a horror film, the way that it tackles its horror is in taking kind of a nostalgic, fantasized version of what we perceive things will be like, whether it's the big city, whether it's the 1960s, and it presents a version of it that's almost exactly what you dreamed it would be. And then it starts to slowly reveal the nightmarish realities of some of these things, where what was once a dream turns into a nightmare, and that idea plays out in multiple different contexts, both literal as well as metaphoric in the way that kind of it happens. This is a very interesting way to kind of use the story as a metaphor for itself in certain senses. And as the story goes along, it becomes more and more nightmarish. The tension is slowly increased as you go along. At the beginning, it's not like a horror film at all. And by the time you get to the third act, everything is kind of wild, crazy, trippy, nightmare-esque, and it just slowly transitions us into that world one step at a time, so it never feels like we just jump immediately into the weird. We make our way there. And I'm trying to avoid being too specific about the way the plot plays out because I think the trailers were intentionally ambiguous as to the exact scenario, so I'm trying to do that as well in my review, but it does get overtly horror-based as you move into the second half of the film, and there are plenty of scares, ghostly elements, vicious murder, threats, danger, but at the same time, there's elements to it that make it psychological, where you don't know how much is just in the person's head, how much is real, and at the same time, it's also a mystery. You're trying to figure out what exactly happened with the specific crime, what happened to these people, who was responsible for it, who's still alive, who wasn't, and that's what makes this movie so interesting. It takes elements from a bunch of different types of stories. The small town girl going to the big city, nostalgia for the 1960s with musical numbers, noir, murder mystery, and then ghost stories at the same time, and then psychological horror, and blends them all together in a mostly very cohesive tone, vibe, and story that, like I said, transitions slowly from small town girl moves to the big city into its weirder aspects as you go along, and just makes for a unique experience. And as I said before, it's nothing like anything Edgar Wright has done before, and all of his talent is still on display. And so if you're looking for a different type of horror film, if you're into kind of like 1960s London culture and what that combined with Edgar Wright styles, this is the movie for you. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the big thing here, as much as the first 2 acts of the film are so kind of refreshing and new and taking a bunch of familiar things and combining them together into something new, when you move into the 3rd act and it starts answering all the interesting questions that have been raised, the answers feel very conventional. Some of them are a little bit predictable. It's like, yeah, okay, I kind of suspected that's where this was heading. As refreshing and clever as the build-up, as clever and refreshing as the setup and build-up were, the actual payoff just feels like something that any one of us could have come up with. And that just leaves you very disappointed. And on just a matter of taste, as much as I respected the cleverness and talent on display here, it's not a film that I imagine that I would rewatch all of that often. The idea of going back to the 1960s and exploring it, that's just not really my thing. I think he did a really good job of what he was trying to do, but on a subject matter, stylistically, it's not exactly the sort of thing that I think that I would re-explore all that often on my own. Real quick before I give you my final score on this one, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your excitement level for Last Night in Soho, and if you've seen it, what did you think about it? Also this weekend, I will be ranking all of Edgar Wright's films, so be sure to come back to check that one out. Last Night in Soho is another example of just how talented and versatile Edgar Wright is as a director. It might not have been my exact taste, and it doesn't end on a high note, but this is a refreshing, clever horror film. Overall, it's a B on the entertainment scale, a 7 out of 10, and horror and Edgar Wright fans should definitely check this one out in the theaters. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to come back this weekend where I'm gonna rank Edgar Wright's films, and if you want another video right now, check out that one right over there. I don't even know what YouTube's recommending to you right now. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.